Hey there, colleagues. How are you doing? I'm excited to talk to you this week and next week about the inner work of teaching and how do we bring a full self to work like this in crazy times like we're currently in, but also just more generally. So let me establish why I think this topic is worth a couple of weeks, why I think it's worth you participating in the Canvas-based discussion around this. And then I just want to give you a 3-2-1. Okay. 3-2-1. Three things to think about, two quotations to facilitate further thinking, and then one question. And that question, that's what I want you to respond to in Canvas. All right. So first of all, why is this topic even worth thinking about? Is this just some feel good kind of thing, man? Or we got some real merit to this? I think that it obviously is worth our time. First of all, in December, Ed Week released a survey in which practically everybody, 9 out of 10 almost teachers said morale is worse now in teaching in December 2020 than it was before the pandemic. And maybe some of that is, hindsight giving a rose tinted view of the past, but there's probably something to that, right? Teaching has been pretty difficult, but this is not a new thing. Like teacher demoralization is not necessarily new. Take a look at this. This is from Gallup. Sorry about the resolution. This is from Gallup in the first part of the 2010s. And they found that 70% of teachers were either not engaged or actively disengaged in their work. You may have heard me talk about this stat before, and I do it because I think it's really important for us to realize that the most common way of experiencing teaching in the United States in the 21st century is what I think we could call occupational burnout. Okay, so this is a definition from the World Health Organization. I guess this kind of shows that it's not just a teacher thing, but I do think teaching is uniquely prone to burnout conditions. But take a look at the 3 dimensions of what WHO calls occupational burnout: feeling energy depleted or exhausted. That's one of the dimensions. Feeling distance from your job or even negative or cynical towards it. That's the second piece. And then third, reduced professional efficacy, or just a feeling like what I do doesn't even matter, so why do it? That's how WHO describes burnout. It's like pretty intense, right? Okay, now let's talk about 3 methods or mindsets or mantras. What else can I say that starts with an M? 3 is pretty good though. We can go 3. 3 things that can help you to avoid this occupational burnout stuff, okay? These are things that I want to encourage you to think about, process, meditate on, pray about, talk about to yourself or to your loved one. All right, number 1, you are not equal to your job. Teachers who are able to distance themselves identitarily from their job tend to be less likely to be burnt out, but it's really hard work. Psychologists call this the locus of identity. When your locus of identity is something outside of you, like your job as a teacher, or maybe your income or your home or something. When it's an external thing, your locus of identity is an external thing. It means that you're always going to have your identity threatened. You know what I mean? But when you can root your identity in something that is more internally derived, did I show up and apply myself as best I could today as a teacher? That's more of an internally situated locus of identity, and it makes burnout a lot less likely. There's a useful graphic that I created one time that shows kind of what you're after. What you're after is to have your identity and your work close. I mean, we don't want it to be way out here, right? That's disengagement. But we would like it to have a slight overlap, not this total overlap. When you have a total overlap, I mean, look at that. You can barely read that. That's a mess, right? That's the point of that graphic. You are not your job. That's number 1. Number 2, mindset or mantra that helps is that failure equals progress. I remember as a student teacher in Ypsilanti, Michigan at Willow Run High School, I was the worst student teacher ever. You can ask my cooperating teacher, Rex Sanders. He could tell you stories. Things that should have taken me just 30 minutes to do with students, I would expand it out into 3 really creative days. And things that I should have spent days doing with students, I would turn into 30 super confusing and frustrating minutes. And those are just my instructional shortcomings. So I was really bad at teaching. And I remember sitting though at the Brown Jug, one of the fine establishments in Ann Arbor for undergraduate students. I remember sitting there with my teaching cohort and saying, you know what, at least one thing that's good about this is I'm figuring out the things that don't work about teaching. Like no one's figuring out more things that don't work than me, I said with my, Miller Lite in my hand. And my fellow cohortees, they just kept probably talking and kept the conversation going, thinking like, oh man, this guy's really struggling. This is awkward. But me, I was kind of sitting there in the revelation that I had just created, that actually I was sort of getting an edge in the area of what doesn't work. And so I started to view failure really curiously and as something that I could grow from. And that began to change the trajectory of my career to the point where I eventually became a competent teacher, right? So failure equals progress. That's thing number two. And thing number three is that the goal of a teacher is to impact students, not to be popular with students. Okay. And this might not be an issue for you, but gosh, was it an issue for me early on? I don't want to, my goal is not to be the popular guy. My goal is to be the teacher who helps my students to master the things that I'm supposed to help them to master. I believe as a teacher of my subject, my grade level, my students, that when you master the things that I'm teaching, it contributes to the likelihood that you'll flourish long-term in your life. And so that is my objective. I want to move learning. That is my goal, not to be popular, not to get picked for this or that. It's not about awards. It is about impacting student learning. That mindset is really important because it fixates you on the right thing, the thing that you're actually after, not just these little side distracting boondoggles like popularity or something like that. All right, three things. You're not your job, failure is progress, impact, not popularity. Now let's take a look at two quotes and then I'll pose your question. Okay, quote number one comes from Greg Ashman's book. He's a UK educator. The book called The Truth About Teaching, an evidence-informed guide for new teachers. Here's the quote. It's easier to stay calm if you place some distance between yourself and your role. I used to imagine that the teacher was a puppet under my control and that I could experiment with what the teacher did and see how the students responded. This helps when students inevitably say hurtful things that they don't really mean. They are reacting to the teacher and not to you as an individual. And quote number two comes from a recent conversation that I had with an educator in Colorado. The guy's name is John, and John is friends with a local rancher in his town who hosts people for like ranch vacations in Colorado. And the rancher always tells his guests at the start of their stay, do you want to know the secret to a great vacation? Low expectations. And my friend John said, I wonder if the secret to a great vocation might be low expectations too. That quote kind of scares me. I'm not sure where I want to go with that, but I found it thought-provoking. I wanted to share it with you. Okay, we looked at three things, two quotes, and now the question to you. What is one method or mantra or mindset that has helped you to keep from burnout at different times during your profession? And by the way, if you're burnt out right now, you can still answer this question. Everybody ebbs and flows between these states. So this is not like only the arrived can contribute. No, I want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So please share that in the discussion. And I hope that you have a great week. Take care.